What if I told you that a civilization survived 2,500 years of invasions, conquests, and revolutions, yet maintained its distinct cultural identity? From Cyrus the Great to the modern Islamic Republic, Persian civilization spans a lifetime few others can match. In this documentary, we'll trace the unbroken thread of Persian identity through millennia of dramatic transformations. You'll discover how a small tribal kingdom became a superpower that controlled 44% of the world's population, created the first Declaration of Human Rights, and continues to shape global politics today. Before the Persians emerged on the world stage, another civilization had already established a complex society in what we now call Iran. The Elamites flourished in southwestern Iran from around 2700 BCE, making them one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Their homeland, known as Elam, centered around cities like Susa, a metropolitan hub that would later become an important capital for Persian kings. The Elamites developed independently from their Mesopotamian neighbors, creating their own distinctive language and cultural identity. Their language, completely unrelated to later Persian or other Indo-European languages, remains partially understood today. What makes Elamite culture particularly interesting is how they maintained their unique identity while simultaneously absorbing influences from powerful neighbors. Their art combined local styles with elements borrowed from Sumer and Babylon, resulting in a hybrid aesthetic that showcased both innovation and adaptation. For nearly 2,000 years, the Elamites were major players in Middle Eastern politics. They alternated between trading partnerships and fierce rivalries with the successive powers of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria. Elamite kings launched daring raids into Mesopotamia, sometimes capturing important religious objects and royal treasures. In 1155 BCE, Elamites even managed to capture the statue of Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, in a raid that shocked the ancient world and demonstrated their military prowess. The political organization of Elam differed significantly from other ancient kingdoms. Rather than a centralized monarchy, they often operated as a confederation of city-states united under a high king. Power was frequently shared between rulers in Susa and Anshan, creating a flexible system that could adapt to changing circumstances. This decentralized approach may explain how Elamite culture survived numerous invasions and setbacks throughout its long history. Elamite artistic achievements laid important foundations for later Persian aesthetics. Their architectural innovations included early ziggurats, massive stepped structures that predated similar Mesopotamian buildings. Elamite metalworkers created intricate bronze objects, showing remarkable technical skill, while their stone carvers produced detailed reliefs that influenced later Persian imperial art. Some motifs first developed by Elamite artists, such as specific animal forms and royal imagery, would reappear centuries later in Achaemenid Persian palaces. The written legacy of the Elamites remains partially mysterious. They developed multiple writing systems, including Linear Elamite, a script that still hasn't fully been deciphered. This writing system, with approximately 80 distinct signs, represents one of the world's oldest independent writing traditions. The Elamites also adapted cuneiform from Mesopotamia for their administrative records, creating a complex bilingual scribal tradition. Elamite religion centered around a pantheon of deities, with Inshushinak, the god of Susa, occupying the central position. Their religious practices involved elaborate rituals, temple worship, and royal ceremonies that connected political power to divine authority. Certain elements of Elamite religious thinking, particularly about cosmic dualism and specific ritual practices, may have influenced later Zoroastrian beliefs. The civilization experienced several periods of renaissance throughout its history, rebuilding after defeats and re-establishing power. Eventually, the Elamites fell to Assyrian conquests in the 7th century BCE, with Ashurbanipal of Assyria boasting about destroying their cities and desecrating their sanctuaries in 646 BCE. Recent genetic studies have revealed a surprising connection between ancient Elamites and modern Iranians, suggesting stronger continuity than previously thought. This means present-day Iranians might share more genetic material with Elamites than with later Persian groups. Perhaps most remarkable is evidence suggesting that the Elamites pioneered an early form of constitutional monarchy. Clay tablets mention a law of succession that limited absolute royal power, potentially representing one of history's first efforts to establish rule of law over the whims of kings, a full 4,000 years ago. While the Elamites laid prehistoric foundations in southern Iran, a new power was emerging in the northwest. Around the 7th century BCE, the Medes, an Iranian people who had migrated into the region centuries earlier, began to transform from scattered tribal groups into a unified kingdom. These Indo-European speakers brought new languages, technologies, and cultural practices that would permanently reshape the Iranian plateau. The Medes originally lived in a collection of 6 major tribes across northern Iran, each functioning as independent units with their own chieftains and territorial boundaries. What transformed these separate groups into an empire was the leadership of King Xerxes, who came to power around 625 BCE. Recognizing the need for military innovation to challenge the dominant Assyrian Empire, Xerxes implemented reforms that modernized Median fighting capabilities. His most significant military innovation reorganized Median warriors into specialized units, separating spearmen, archers, and cavalry instead of having them fight as a disorganized mass. This seemingly simple change revolutionized warfare in the region and created a tactical flexibility that Median commanders used to great advantage. The Achaemenid Persians later adopted and expanded this system, making it a foundation of their military success. The defining moment for the Median Empire came in 612 BCE when Xerxes formed an alliance with the Neo-Babylonians under Nabopolassar. Together, these powers launched a coordinated attack against Nineveh, the seemingly impregnable capital of Assyria. After a 3-month siege, the allies captured and destroyed the city, ending Assyrian dominance that had terrorized the Near East for centuries. The fall of Nineveh ranks among the most consequential geopolitical shifts in ancient history, removing a superpower and creating a power vacuum that the Medes quickly filled. At its height, the Median Empire controlled territories stretching from central Anatolia, or modern Turkey, to parts of Central Asia. This vast domain included diverse populations speaking different languages and practicing various religions. Managing this diversity required the Medes to develop administrative techniques that balanced central control with local autonomy, an approach that became a hallmark of later Iranian empires. Despite their impressive achievements, the Medes left surprisingly few monuments or inscriptions of their own. Much of what we know about them comes from the accounts of others, primarily Greek historians like Herodotus and records from Babylon and Assyria. This relative silence in the archaeological record creates a historical challenge. We see the Medes primarily through foreign eyes rather than through their own words. The Median capital at Ecbatana, now Hamadan in western Iran, was reportedly one of the ancient world's most impressive cities. According to Herodotus, it featured 7 concentric walls, each painted a different color: white, black, purple, blue, orange, silver, and gold. While archaeological evidence hasn't confirmed this exact description, excavations have revealed substantial fortifications that support the image of a wealthy, well-defended royal center. The Median Empire lasted less than a century. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus the Great, ruler of the Persian tribe and himself half Median through his mother, defeated the last Median king, Astyages. Rather than destroying Median power, Cyrus incorporated their elites, administration, and military into his new Persian Empire. Many Medes served as generals, governors, and advisors in the Achaemenid state, creating a Persian-Median partnership rather than a complete conquest. Some historical evidence suggests that Medes maintained democratic elements in their tribal governance, with councils of elders making decisions alongside kings. These traditions potentially influenced later Persian governance models that incorporated consultative elements. Perhaps most remarkable is that the Medes, despite their brief time as an imperial power, successfully challenged Mesopotamian dominance that had shaped the region for millennia. For a brief window of history, they were the dominant force in the ancient Near East. Yet unlike many other great powers, they left almost no written records in their own language, making them a civilization known primarily through its actions rather than its words. Around 550 BCE, a figure emerged who would transform Persia from a regional power to a global empire. Cyrus the Great, born to a Persian father and a Median mother, united these previously rivaled peoples and created what historians now call the Achaemenid Empire, named after his family lineage. His rise to power began with a conflict against his own grandfather, Astyages, the last king of Media. Ancient sources describe a complex political-military struggle that ended with Cyrus overthrowing Median rule. Yet instead of destroying Median culture and institutions, he incorporated them into his new state. This pattern of integration rather than destruction became Cyrus's signature approach. After securing his position in Iran, he turned westward toward the wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia. King Croesus of Lydia, whose name became synonymous with fabulous wealth, had attacked Persian territories thinking the new empire vulnerable. Within 2 years, Cyrus defeated Croesus, captured the Lydian capital of Sardis, and absorbed the kingdom's substantial gold reserves into his treasury. The conquest of Lydia gave Persia access to the Aegean Sea and brought the Greek cities of western Anatolia under Persian control. Cyrus's most famous conquest came in 539 BCE when his armies captured Babylon, the ancient center of Mesopotamian civilization and capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. According to both Persian and Babylonian accounts, Cyrus entered the city without significant bloodshed. He respected Babylonian religious practices and presented himself as chosen by the Babylonian god Marduk to restore proper worship and justice. This political masterstroke transformed what could have been bitter resistance into relatively peaceful acceptance of Persian rule. The capture of Babylon yielded one of history's most important artifacts, the Cyrus cylinder. This clay barrel contains Cyrus's proclamation to the Babylonians, describing his policies of religious tolerance and restoration of local traditions. The text outlines his permission for displaced people to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. This included the Jews, who had been exiled to Babylon decades earlier. The Hebrew Bible portrays Cyrus as a liberator sent by God, and his decree allowing Jews to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem earned him unique status as the only non-Jewish person called Messiah in the Bible. Cyrus built his ceremonial capital at Pasargadae in southern Iran, where his tomb still stands today, a simple structure built on a stepped platform with a gabled roof. Unlike the massive monuments of Egyptian pharaohs or Mesopotamian kings, its relatively modest design reflects the pragmatic nature of Persian rule. Even after 2,500 years, this tomb remains an important symbol of Iranian national identity, connecting modern Iranians to their pre-Islamic past. The empire Cyrus created stretched from the Mediterranean to Central Asia, encompassing diverse peoples, languages, and religions. To govern this vast territory, he developed the satrapy system, dividing the empire into provinces, or satrapies, ruled by governors or satraps, who answered directly to him. This structure balanced central authority with local autonomy, allowing subject people to maintain their customs while ensuring imperial revenue and security. Unlike many ancient conquerors who enslaved defeated populations or imposed their gods and customs, Cyrus allowed cultural and religious diversity throughout his domains. This approach wasn't merely idealistic, it was practical governance that reduced resistance and created stability. By respecting local traditions while maintaining ultimate authority, Cyrus established a model of multicultural empire building that influenced rulers for centuries. Cyrus died in 530 BCE while campaigning in Central Asia, but his legacy extended far beyond his lifetime. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia 2 centuries later, he made a special journey to visit Cyrus's tomb and ordered its protection. More remarkably, Cyrus's governance principles influenced modern political thought. Thomas Jefferson owned 2 copies of a biography of Cyrus, and the Cyrus cylinder has been displayed at UN headquarters as an ancient precursor to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, an extraordinary testament to how this ancient ruler's ideas continue to resonate in the modern world. When Cyrus the Great died in 530 BCE, his empire passed first to his son Cambyses II, who conquered Egypt but died under mysterious circumstances on his return journey. What followed was a succession crisis that threatened to tear apart the young Persian Empire. Into this chaos stepped Darius I, a distant relative of the royal family who claimed the throne in 522 BCE. According to his own account preserved in the Behistun inscription, Darius faced and defeated multiple pretenders who claimed to be the rightful heir. The Behistun inscription itself, carved high on a cliff face in western Iran, stands as one of the most important documents in ancient history. Written in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, this massive relief shows Darius triumphant over his enemies, with his foot on the chest of the main pretender, while 9 other rebel leaders stand bound before him. This monument served both as propaganda for Darius's legitimacy and as the key that eventually allowed scholars to decipher cuneiform script in the 19th century. Once secure on his throne, Darius expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent. Persian armies pushed eastward into the Indus River in modern Pakistan, northward into the Caucasus Mountains, westward across North Africa, and even into southeastern Europe. At its peak, the empire encompassed approximately 5.5 million square kilometers and contained nearly 50 million people, roughly 44% of the world's population at that time. To manage this vast territory, Darius refined the satrapy system started by Cyrus. He divided the empire into about 20 provinces, each overseen by 3 officials: a satrap or governor, a military commander, and a secretary who reported directly to the king. This separation of powers created checks and balances that prevented any single official from becoming too powerful. Royal inspectors, known as the eyes and ears of the king, traveled throughout the provinces to monitor local administration and report back to Darius. Darius revolutionized the imperial economy by introducing the first standardized currency system that spanned multiple continents. The gold Daric and silver Siglos coins provided reliable mediums of exchange across the empire, facilitating trade and tax collection. He standardized weights and measures, eliminating the confusion of local systems and creating a unified economic space from Egypt to India. Perhaps his most famous infrastructure project was the Royal Road, which stretched over 2,500 kilometers from Sardis near the Aegean Sea to Susa in southwestern Iran. Along this road, Darius established a courier system with relay stations approximately every 25 kilometers, where fresh horses and riders waited. This ancient postal service could carry messages across the empire in about 7 days, a journey that would take a regular traveler 3 months to complete. Darius chose a new site for his ceremonial capital, Persepolis, or City of the Persians. Construction began around 518 BCE on a massive platform against a mountain backdrop. The complex featured massive columned halls, intricate stone staircases decorated with tribute-bearing delegates from across the empire, and elaborate audience chambers where Darius received visitors. These buildings combined architectural elements from Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, and other parts of the empire into a uniquely Persian imperial style. Not all of Darius's military ventures succeeded. His campaign against the nomadic Scythians north of the Black Sea ended inconclusively, and his attempt to punish Athens for supporting a revolt in Ionia led to defeat at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. This setback, while relatively minor for the vast Persian Empire, would have major historical consequences when his son Xerxes attempted to finish what Darius had started. Darius died in 486 BCE, leaving behind an empire with sophisticated institutions and unprecedented prosperity. His administrative innovations proved so effective that many were adopted by later empires, including Rome. Even the British East India Company, 2 millennia later, would study Persian provincial management as they developed their own colonial governance systems, a remarkable testament to Darius's lasting impact on imperial administration. When Darius died, his son Xerxes inherited not just an empire, but also a mission to complete his father's unfinished business with the Greeks. While Marathon had been a setback for Persia, it represented just one battle on the far western edge of their vast domains. For Xerxes, however, this defeat demanded a response that would demonstrate Persian power and bring the troublesome Greek city-states firmly under imperial control. Preparations for the Greek campaign were unprecedented in scale. For 4 years, Xerxes gathered supplies, built ships, and conscripted troops from across his domains. The resulting force represented the extraordinary diversity of the Persian Empire. Egyptians, Babylonians, Bactrians, Scythians, Ethiopians, and dozens of other peoples marched under Persian command. Each group brought distinctive weapons, fighting styles, and equipment, creating an army of remarkable variety but uneven quality. In the spring of 480 BCE, Xerxes faced his first major challenge, crossing the Hellespont Strait between Asia and Europe. His engineers constructed 2 pontoon bridges using hundreds of ships lashed together and secured with massive cables. When a sudden storm destroyed the original bridges, Xerxes reportedly had the sea whipped with chains and branded with hot irons while the supervisors were executed. This bizarre episode, recorded by Herodotus, likely represents a Persian religious ritual to calm the waters, being misinterpreted by Greek observers. The rebuilt bridges allowed Xerxes to march his entire force into Europe, an army so large that, according to Herodotus, it drank entire rivers dry. Modern historians doubt the ancient claims of over 1 million soldiers, but even conservative estimates suggest a force of 100,000 to 200,000 fighters plus support personnel, still the largest army assembled up to that time. As Persian forces moved south through Greece, most cities quickly submitted, providing the symbolic earth and water that Persian heralds demanded as tokens of surrender. Sparta and Athens, however, remained defiant. When Persian messengers arrived in Sparta demanding submission, the Spartans threw them into a well, telling them they could find plenty of earth and water there. The first major confrontation came at the narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force led by 300 Spartan warriors made their famous stand. For 3 days, they held the pass against overwhelming Persian numbers before being outflanked and destroyed. While militarily a Persian victory, Thermopylae became a powerful symbol of Greek resistance that resonates even today. With the path to southern Greece now open, Xerxes captured and burned Athens, fulfilling his primary objective. Yet, at this moment of apparent triumph, disaster struck at sea. The Persian navy engaged the Greek fleet in the narrow Strait of Salamis, where Persian numerical advantage became a liability. The more maneuverable Greek ships outfought their enemies in the confined space, sinking and capturing over 200 Persian vessels. Watching from his golden throne on the shore, Xerxes witnessed the destruction of a significant portion of his naval power. Following this defeat, Xerxes returned to Asia with much of his army, leaving his general Mardonius to continue the campaign. The following year, Greek forces decisively defeated the remaining Persian troops at the Battle of Plataea, effectively ending Persian attempts to conquer Greece. Despite this Western setback, the Persian Empire remained powerful and prosperous under Xerxes. He continued his father's building programs at Persepolis, completing the massive Gate of All Nations and the 100-column hall. These structures featured colossal bull-headed columns and elaborate stone reliefs celebrating Persian might. Xerxes' reign ended violently in 465 BCE when he was assassinated in a palace conspiracy led by his bodyguard commander and one of his officials. This internal instability revealed growing weaknesses in the imperial system. While the Greek campaign is often portrayed as a turning point in Persian fortunes, the more serious long-term threat came from within. The increasing court intrigues, succession struggles, and provincial unrest that would gradually undermine Achaemenid power over the following centuries. By the mid-4th century BCE, the Achaemenid Empire had entered a period of decline. Though still vast in territory, the empire faced growing challenges under Darius III, who took the throne in 336 BCE. Court intrigues had become common, with royal family members and officials constantly competing for power. Provincial rebellions flared up with increasing frequency, while the imperial taxation system grew heavier to fund the lavish court lifestyle. The administrative efficiency that Darius the Great had established 2 centuries earlier had gradually eroded. In this weakened state, Persia faced its greatest external threat. Alexander, the young king of Macedonia who had united the Greek city-states, crossed into Asia Minor in 334 BCE with approximately 40,000 troops. Though dramatically outnumbered by Persian forces, Alexander's army was highly disciplined and employed innovative tactics. At the Battle of Granicus, his first encounter with Persian forces, Alexander personally led a cavalry charge that broke through the Persian line, demonstrating a boldness that would characterize his entire campaign. The following year, Darius III personally led a much larger army against Alexander at Issus. Despite commanding perhaps 100,000 troops, Darius positioned his forces in terrain that neutralized his numerical advantage. When Alexander's cavalry threatened his position, Darius fled the battlefield, abandoning his army, his family, and even his royal tent. This action severely damaged Persian morale and his legitimacy as king. Alexander captured Darius's mother, wife, and daughters, treating them with respect that contrasted with typical ancient warfare practices. With the Persian army in disarray, Alexander moved along the Mediterranean coast, securing ports and supply lines before turning inland. He entered Babylon without resistance in 331 BCE, welcomed by priests and officials who had already witnessed the collapse of Persian authority. From there, Alexander captured Susa, one of the imperial capitals, acquiring vast treasuries that financed his continued campaign. The symbolic climax of Alexander's conquest came at Persepolis in 330 BCE. After thoroughly looting the palace treasury, reportedly requiring 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels to transport the gold and silver, Alexander allowed his troops to plunder the city. According to ancient sources, during a drunken celebration, Alexander and his companions set fire to the palace complex. While some historians debate whether this burning was accidental or deliberate, the destruction of Persepolis represented the psychological dismantling of Achaemenid power. Meanwhile, Darius III fled eastward, trying to raise another army. His own officials, seeing his cause as hopeless, turned against him. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, arrested Darius and later killed him when Alexander's forces drew near. Alexander pursued Bessus across Central Asia, eventually capturing and executing him, presenting himself as the legitimate successor to the Persian throne, avenging the murdered king. As Alexander consolidated control over the former Persian territories, he implemented a remarkable policy of cultural fusion. He began wearing Persian royal dress on certain occasions, adopted Persian court ceremonies, and appointed Persians to important administrative positions alongside Greeks and Macedonians. This approach angered many of his Greek officers, who had seen the campaign as a punishment of their traditional enemy. Alexander's marriages to Persian noblewomen, particularly his wedding to Roxana and the later mass marriage ceremony at Susa, where he encouraged his officers to take Persian wives, represented attempts to blend Greek and Persian cultures. The fall of the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BCE ended 2 centuries of Persian imperial rule. When Alexander entered Persepolis, he discovered perhaps the greatest concentration of wealth in the ancient world: 120,000 talents of precious metals. Yet even amid looting and destruction, Alexander made a point to visit the tomb of Cyrus the Great. Upon finding it desecrated, he ordered it restored and the Vandals punished, an early signal that he intended not just to conquer Persia, but to claim its imperial legacy as his own. When Alexander died unexpectedly in Babylon in 323 BCE, his vast empire immediately fell into crisis. With no clear heir and ambitious generals circling for power, the unified realm quickly splintered. From this chaos emerged Seleucus I Nicator, a former cavalry commander who secured control of Babylon in 312 BCE and gradually expanded his authority across the eastern territories. His new empire incorporated the Iranian plateau, Mesopotamia, and at its height stretched from the Mediterranean to the borders of India. The Seleucid rulers faced an immense challenge: how to govern a territory where Greeks and Macedonians formed a tiny minority among much larger native populations. Their solution was to establish new Greek-style cities throughout their domains. The most impressive of these was Seleucia on the Tigris, built near modern Baghdad. This planned metropolis featured a grid layout, Greek temples, theaters, gymnasiums, and public baths, all hallmarks of Hellenistic urban planning. The city grew so rapidly that it eventually rivaled ancient Babylon in size and importance. Greek became the language of government and high culture under Seleucid rule. Official documents, coins, and inscriptions used Greek exclusively, while Greek artistic styles, philosophy, and religious practices were actively promoted at court and in urban centers. The gymnasium became particularly important as an institution that trained young men in Greek cultural values and physical ideals. These cultural centers created a visible divide between Hellenized elites and the general population. Despite these Hellenization efforts, Persian cultural resistance proved remarkably resilient. In rural areas and highland regions especially, local populations maintained their traditional languages, religious practices, and social customs. Zoroastrianism remained the primary faith of most Iranians, with fire temples continuing to function throughout the Seleucid period. The Persian language persisted in everyday use despite having no official status, preserving cultural unity until circumstances allowed for a Persian revival. The Seleucid Empire faced constant challenges to its stability. Externally, the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt competed for influence and territory in the west, while the Mauryan Empire in India threatened eastern borders. Internally, the vast distances made communication difficult, and provincial governors sometimes established effectively independent realms. Royal succession regularly triggered civil wars as multiple claimants fought for the throne. These structural weaknesses gradually eroded central authority and created opportunities for new powers to emerge. In many regions, especially the eastern provinces, a hybrid Greco-Iranian elite developed. Persian nobles who adopted elements of Greek culture gained positions in the military and administration, serving as intermediaries between rulers and subjects. Intermarriage between Greeks and local elites created families with mixed cultural identities who could navigate both worlds. Archaeological evidence shows homes containing both Greek pottery and traditional Persian items, suggesting the complex cultural blending occurring at the personal level. The Seleucids' grip on their eastern territories began weakening in the mid-3rd century BCE. First, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom broke away in Central Asia, establishing an independent state that blended Greek and local traditions. More significantly, around 247 BCE, a group called the Parthians began expanding from northeastern Iran, gradually taking control of the Iranian plateau. The Seleucids launched multiple campaigns to recover these territories, but ultimately failed to re-establish their authority in the east. What makes the Seleucid period fascinating is how the rulers themselves adapted to local realities despite their Greek origins. Official portraits often showed Seleucid kings in Persian-style clothing when addressing Eastern subjects. Several kings made offerings at Zoroastrian temples to gain local support. They maintained the Persian administrative systems while adding Greek elements, creating a pragmatic hybrid governance structure. The Seleucid failure to fully Hellenize Persia ultimately allowed for the eventual reassertion of Iranian political and cultural identity. Their urban centers introduced important new cultural elements to the Iranian world, but their inability to penetrate rural areas meant Persian traditions remained intact, waiting for the political circumstances that would allow native Iranian dynasties to reclaim power once again. As Alexander's empire fractured and the Seleucids struggled to maintain control over their vast territories, a new power emerged from the northeastern regions of Iran. The Parthians, originally a nomadic Iranian tribe, began their rise to prominence around 247 BCE, when their leader, Arsaces I, established an independent kingdom in the region of Parthia. What started as a small breakaway state would eventually grow into an empire that revived Iranian political power after centuries of foreign rule. The early Parthian leaders recognized the weaknesses in the Seleucid Empire, with its overextended borders and internal conflicts. They methodically expanded their territory, capturing the important Iranian plateau region by region. By the 1st century BCE, they controlled lands from the Euphrates River in the west to the Hindu Kush Mountains in the east. This vast territory positioned them as a crucial intermediary between the Roman Empire in the west and Han Dynasty China in the east. What made the Parthians particularly effective was their military innovation. Their army centered around two types of cavalry that complemented each other perfectly. The cataphracts were heavily armored horsemen who functioned as shock troops, their horses and riders covered in scale armor, wielding long lances that could break enemy infantry formations. Supporting them were horse archers who used the composite bow to devastating effect. These mounted archers perfected the technique known as the Parthian shot, feigning retreat and then turning in the saddle to shoot arrows at pursuing enemies. This tactic confounded conventional armies that couldn't match their mobility. Unlike the centralized Achaemenid or Seleucid states, Parthian political structure resembled a feudal system. The Arsacid king relied on the support of powerful noble families who maintained their own territories and military forces. While this arrangement ensured the loyalty of local elites, it also created chronic problems with succession disputes and internal rivalries. Many Parthian kings spent as much energy managing their nobles as they did fighting external enemies. The Parthians consciously presented themselves as restorers of Persian traditions after Hellenistic rule. They revived Zoroastrian religious practices, supported local Iranian customs, and gradually reintroduced Persian administrative systems. At the same time, they were pragmatic about incorporating useful Hellenistic elements. Their coins featured Greek inscriptions alongside Persian imagery, and their art combined Iranian themes with Greek techniques. This cultural synthesis proved highly effective in legitimizing their rule among diverse populations. Ctesiphon, near modern Baghdad, became the main Parthian capital and developed into a major commercial and political center. The city's strategic location on the Tigris River made it ideal for controlling trade routes while remaining defensible against Western invasions. From this base, Parthian forces regularly clashed with Roman armies over control of Mesopotamia and the valuable trade routes that passed through the regions. Pinnacle of Parthian military success came in 53 BCE at the Battle of Carrhae. Roman general Crassus, seeking military glory to match his allies Pompey and Caesar, invaded Parthian territory with a large force. The Parthians employed their superior mobility and the desert environment to surround and destroy the Roman legions. Crassus himself was killed, and the Romans lost their military standards, eagle emblems considered sacred to the legions. This humiliating defeat became legendary in Rome and established the Parthians as Rome's most formidable eastern rival. The Parthians took immense pride in this victory. They used captured Roman soldiers as laborers to build new cities and displayed the captured Roman standards in public ceremonies. These eagles would remain in Parthian hands for decades until diplomatically returned to Augustus. Perhaps most remarkably, Chinese historical records mention the Parthian Empire as Angshi, describing diplomatic exchanges and trade relations along the Silk Road. These connections made the Parthians key players in the first truly global commerce network, facilitating the exchange of goods and ideas between East and West long before the modern era of globalization. After centuries of Parthian rule, a new Persian dynasty emerged that would reshape Iran's identity and challenge Rome for dominance of the ancient world. In 224 CE, a local ruler named Ardashir defeated the last Parthian king in battle near Isfahan. Claiming descent from a legendary figure named Sasan, Ardashir founded what became known as the Sassanian Empire, the last great Persian dynasty before the Islamic conquests. Unlike the Parthians, who maintained a loose confederation, the Sassanians created a highly centralized state with power concentrated in the king's hands. Ardashir and his successors deliberately connected themselves to the ancient Achaemenids, reviving Persian traditions that had been dormant for centuries. They commissioned rock reliefs showing their divine right to rule, carved alongside the ancient monuments of Darius and Xerxes to visually link the dynasties. This Persian revival centered on Zoroastrianism, which became the official state religion. Fire temples dedicated to Ahura Mazda appeared throughout the empire, and Zoroastrian priests gained unprecedented political influence. The head priest, or Mobadan Mobad, served as a key royal advisor, while religious courts enforced orthodox practices. Inscriptions from this period explicitly mention the twin pillars of throne and altar supporting Persian civilization. The most successful Sassanian ruler, Shapur I, achieved what no other Persian king had managed: the capture of a Roman emperor in battle. In 260 CE, his forces surrounded and captured Emperor Valerian near Edessa. This unprecedented victory was immortalized in a massive rock carving at Nakhshe Rustam, showing Shapur on horseback with Valerian kneeling before him. Roman sources claim Valerian spent his remaining years as Shapur's personal footstool when mounting his horse, though Persian accounts suggest more dignified treatment. Sassanian cities showcased Persian engineering and artistic achievement. The capital at Ctesiphon featured the Tak Kasra, a massive vaulted hall with an arch spanning 27 meters, the largest unreinforced brick arch in the world, parts of which still stand today. Perhaps more significant was the Gunda Shapur, which became one of the ancient world's most important centers of learning. Its academy and hospital attracted scholars from across the known world, particularly after Emperor Justinian closed Athenian philosophical schools in 529 CE, sending many Byzantine intellectuals eastward. Culturally, the Sassanians developed sophisticated artistic traditions that would have lasting influence. Their distinctive style featured highly decorative silverwork with royal hunting scenes, textiles with geometric or animal patterns, and stucco architectural decorations. The game of chess, known in Middle Persian as chatrang, likely developed in this period before spreading westward to Europe and eastward to China. Similarly, the game of backgammon and the sport of polo originated or were formalized under Sassanian patronage. The empire's military centered around heavily armored cavalry known as savarin. These elite horsemen, the noble warrior class of Sassanian society, used techniques and equipment that would later influence Byzantine and medieval European heavy cavalry. The distinctive Sassanian helmet with chainmail face guard provided a level of protection unprecedented in ancient warfare. Despite its cultural and military strength, the Sassanian Empire faced recurring challenges from its Western rival. In the early 7th century, Emperor Khosrow II initially achieved stunning victories against Byzantium, capturing Jerusalem and even threatening Constantinople. However, Byzantine Emperor Heraclius launched a devastating counterattack. The resulting 25-year war severely weakened both empires. This mutual exhaustion proved catastrophic when a new force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. The Sassanian Empire, with its depleted military and economic resources, faced Arab Muslim armies just as it was recovering from the Byzantine conflict. At the decisive Battle of Qadisiyah in 636 CE, Arab forces defeated the Sassanian military, leading to the gradual Islamic conquest of Persia. By 651 CE, the last Sassanian emperor, Yazdegerd III, was killed while fleeing eastward, bringing an end to both the dynasty and pre-Islamic Persian rule. In the 630s CE, a new power emerged from the Arabian Peninsula that would permanently transform Persia. The Sassanian Empire, exhausted after decades of devastating warfare with Byzantine forces, faced Arab Muslim armies filled with religious zeal and military innovation. What made the Islamic conquest possible was the perfect storm of Sassanian weakness after Emperor Khosrow II's failed campaign against Byzantium had depleted imperial resources and morale. The first major confrontation came at Al-Qadisiyah in 636 CE, where Arab forces under Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas faced the Sassanian army commanded by Rostam Farrukhzad. The battle lasted several days, with the Persians initially holding advantage due to their war elephants and superior numbers. However, a sandstorm blowing in the faces of Persian troops, combined with Arab tactical adaptations, turned the tide. Rostam himself was killed, and the Persian army retreated in disarray. This defeat opened Mesopotamia to Arab advances. The final blow to Sassanian military resistance came at the Battle of Nahavand in 642 CE, where Arab forces decisively defeated the Persian army. Muslim chroniclers called this the Victory of Victories because it effectively broke organized Sassanian resistance and opened the Iranian plateau to conquest. The last Sassanian emperor, Yazdegerd III, fled eastward, seeking allies to restore his throne. In 651 CE, he was assassinated by a local miller near Merv in Central Asia, an inglorious end for a dynasty that had ruled Persia for over 4 centuries. The conquest was not the sudden collapse often portrayed in simplified narratives. Many Persian cities and regions held out for years, while others negotiated surrender terms that allowed them significant autonomy in exchange for tribute payments. The mountainous regions of northern Iran and parts of Central Asia remained effectively independent for generations. This gradual process meant that Persian administrative infrastructure remained largely intact, providing continuity amid political change. Religious transformation proceeded even more slowly than political conquest. For over a century after the invasion, Zoroastrians remained the majority in many areas. Islam spread first in cities and along trade routes, while rural areas maintained traditional practices much longer. Non-Muslims lived under the dhimmi system, which granted legal protection to, quote, people of the book in exchange for paying the jizya tax and accepting certain restrictions. Though second-class status created pressure to convert, the process unfolded across generations rather than immediately. The fall of the Zoroastrian priesthood represented the most significant rupture in Persian cultural continuity. This powerful class had been intimately connected with Sassanian state power, providing religious legitimacy to the monarchy. Many fire temples were converted to mosques or abandoned as Zoroastrian communities dwindled. Yet, remarkably, numerous pre-Islamic cultural elements survived by adapting to the new religious context. The Persian New Year celebration, Nowruz, continued under Islamic rule with modified symbolism. Ancient Persian festivals were given Islamic interpretations or merged with Islamic holy days. Perhaps most strikingly, Persian administrative and cultural traditions proved so sophisticated that the Arab conquerors adopted many of them. The Caliphate's taxation system was largely based on Sassanian models. Court ceremonies, governmental organization, and even architectural styles showed clear Persian influence as the empire developed. Some Zoroastrian communities fled Persia during this period, eventually settling in western India, where their descendants, known as Parsis, continue practicing their ancient faith today. The conquest that ended Zoroastrian Persia ultimately transformed Islam itself. As Persians converted and entered Islamic intellectual life, they brought philosophical sophistication, literary traditions, and administrative experience that profoundly shaped Islamic civilization. Persian scholars would soon become leading figures in Islamic theology, philosophy, science, and literature, creating a new Persian-Islamic synthesis that would dominate the Eastern Islamic world for centuries to come. The fall of the Sassanian Empire marked a political end to Persian rule, but the story of Persian influence was far from over. After the Islamic conquest, Persia became a province of successive Islamic caliphates. First, under the Umayyads, who ruled from Damascus between 661 and 750 CE. During this initial period, Arab rulers maintained clear distinctions between Arab Muslims and converts from other backgrounds. Persians who embraced Islam found themselves in an awkward position. They had joined the new faith, but remained second-class citizens, excluded from high office and subject to the same taxes as non-Muslims. This discriminatory system created growing resentment, especially in the eastern provinces where Persian cultural identity remained strong. These tensions eventually exploded in the Abbasid Revolution of 750 CE, a movement that began in the Persian province of Khorasan under the leadership of Abu Muslim. This charismatic Persian convert mobilized opposition to Umayyad rule, uniting various dissatisfied groups under the banner of restoring true Islamic values. The successful revolution ended Umayyad rule and established the Abbasid Caliphate, significantly shifting the political center eastward. The Abbasids built their new capital at Baghdad, deliberately positioning it near the former Sassanian centers of power. This location symbolized a profound shift in the Islamic world's orientation. Unlike their predecessors, the Abbasids embraced Persian administrative expertise and cultural sophistication. Persian converts now entered the highest levels of government, the military, and intellectual life. Within a generation, the caliphal court had adopted Persian customs, dress styles, and administrative practices. The remarkable Barmakid family exemplifies this transformation. Originally Buddhist temple administrators from Balkh in Central Asia, they converted to Islam and rose to become the most powerful viziers or ministers of the early Abbasid period. Under their influence, the caliphs sponsored translations of scientific and philosophical works from Greek, Sanskrit, and Pahlavi or Middle Persian into Arabic. This knowledge transfer created the foundation for the Islamic Golden Age, with Persian administrators directing the funding towards scholarly activities that preserved and expanded ancient learning. Language underwent a fascinating evolution during this period. Arabic became the language of religion, science, and official documents, but Persian continued as the everyday language for millions. Gradually, a new form of Persian emerged, written in Arabic script and incorporating numerous Arabic loanwords while retaining its distinct Indo-European grammar. This new Persian, Farsi, developed into a sophisticated literary language that would spread across Central, South, and Western Asia. By the 9th century, Persian intellectuals had fully entered Islamic scholarly life while maintaining connections to their cultural heritage. Scholars like Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, who gave us the word algorithm, Abu Ali ibn Sina, known in Europe as Avicenna, made groundbreaking contributions to mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Their works, though written mainly in Arabic, carried distinctly Persian intellectual traditions and approaches to knowledge. The intellectual reconquest extended beyond science and administration. Persian literary forms and court customs gradually reshaped elite culture across the Islamic world. Persian poetry introduced new genres and aesthetic sensibilities. Persian concepts of kingship and governance influenced political theory. Even the structure of Muslim courts with their elaborate protocols owed much to Sassanian models. The story of Persians under the Caliphate reveals a remarkable historical irony. While politically conquered, Persian civilization demonstrated extraordinary resilience by transforming its conqueror's culture. Within 2 centuries of military defeat, Persian cultural patterns had become so embedded in Islamic civilization that they formed an inseparable part of its identity. This conquest from within allowed Persian identity to survive and evolve rather than disappear. No other conquered civilization in the ancient world managed to so thoroughly influence its conquerors while adapting to new religious and political realities, a testament to the depth and sophistication of Persian cultural traditions. While the Abbasid Caliphate gradually weakened in the 9th century, a Persian dynasty emerged in the northeastern frontiers that would transform Islamic civilization. The Samanids, descended from a Buddhist noble named Saman who had converted to Islam, established their rule in Transoxiana and Khorasan beginning in 819 CE. Initially serving as governors for the Abbasids, they gradually built an independent state while maintaining nominal loyalty to Baghdad. This balancing act allowed them to develop their own distinctive identity without triggering a direct confrontation with the Caliphate. What made the Samanids revolutionary was their explicit embrace of Persian cultural heritage within an Islamic framework. Unlike previous Muslim dynasties that emphasized Arab traditions, the Samanids proudly connected themselves to pre-Islamic Persian civilization. Their coins featured Arabic religious inscriptions on one side and ancient Persian symbols on the other, a visual representation of their dual identity as both Muslim rulers and Persian kings. Bukhara, their magnificent capital, grew into one of the world's great cultural centers. The Samanids transformed this ancient Silk Road city with new mosques, libraries, and bazaars. Merchants and scholars traveled from as far as China and the Mediterranean to study and trade in this cosmopolitan hub. The city became so renowned that it was called the Dome of Islam for its concentration of religious scholars and scientific advancement. The most significant Samanid contribution was elevating New Persian, or Farsi, as a literary language. For nearly 3 centuries after the Arab conquest, Persian had survived primarily as a spoken language with limited written use. The Samanid court changed this by actively sponsoring Persian poets and writers. They commissioned translations of major Arabic works into Persian, including historical texts and scientific treatises. This officially legitimized Persian as a language of high culture and Islamic learning. This literary renaissance produced figures like Rudaki, considered the father of Persian poetry, whose verses set standards for rhythm and imagery that influenced generations of poets. The Samanid period also saw the collection of ancient Persian legends and historical traditions into a coherent narrative. These stories of pre-Islamic kings and heroes form the basis for what would become the Shahnameh, or Book of Kings, completed by Ferdowsi in the early 11th century after the Samanids had fallen. The Samanids maintained a delicate cultural balance, supporting Islamic orthodoxy while preserving Persian identity. Their courts were centers of Islamic legal study and theological debate, but they simultaneously celebrated ancient Iranian festivals and incorporated Zoroastrian symbols into their art. This synthesis created a model for how Persian culture could thrive within an Islamic framework, a template followed for centuries afterward. Their architectural legacy survives most visibly in the Samanid Mausoleum in Bukhara. This perfectly proportioned square building with a hemispherical dome represents one of the oldest surviving Islamic monuments in Central Asia. Its intricate brickwork creates geometric patterns of light and shadow that demonstrate sophisticated mathematical and engineering principles. By the late 10th century, the Samanid state faced mounting pressure from the Turkish tribes pushing into their territories. In 999 CE, they finally fell to the Turkic Achaemenids and Ghaznavids who divided their realms. Yet even as Persian political power declined, the cultural foundations laid by the Samanids proved enduring. In a remarkable historical twist, the Turkish and Mongol conquerors who took control of former Persian territories adopted Persian as their administrative and literary language. This cultural victory proved more lasting than any military conquest. For the next 1,000 years, Persian would serve as the language of literature, administration, and high culture across a vast region stretching from Anatolia to India. Even the Turkic and Mongol rulers who defeated Persian dynasties ended up perpetuating Persian cultural traditions, perhaps the most impressive testament to the Samanid achievement in cultural revival. In the 11th century, a new power emerged that would fundamentally reshape the political landscape of the Middle East. The Seljuks, nomadic warriors from the Central Asian steppes, moved into Iran with military force that few could resist. They had recently converted to Sunni Islam and carried their religious fervor alongside their traditional fighting skills. By 1040, they defeated the existing Ghaznavid forces at the Battle of Dadanakan, establishing control over Khorasan and beginning the Great Seljuk Empire. What happened next reveals one of history's most fascinating cultural transitions. These Turkic conquerors, rather than imposing their culture on the sophisticated Persian civilization they encountered, instead absorbed Persian administrative systems, court practices, and cultural expressions. The resulting Turco-Persian synthesis created a powerful new model: Turkic military strength combined with Persian governmental expertise. This partnership would become the template for numerous Islamic states for centuries to come. The Seljuk rulers made Persian cities their centers of power, with Isfahan becoming their principal capital. Under their patronage, urban centers flourished with new architectural projects. The Friday Mosque of Isfahan, greatly expanded during this period, showcases the distinct architectural innovations of Seljuk builders with its four-iwan design and magnificent dome. Throughout their territories, they constructed caravanserais along trade routes, facilitating commerce and cultural exchange across vast domains. Perhaps most tellingly, Persian became the official administrative and literary language of the Seljuk court. The Turkic rulers themselves often spoke their native language, but all official business, correspondence, and cultural production occurred in Persian. Even their coins featured Persian inscriptions alongside Arabic religious phrases, demonstrating this linguistic hierarchy. The relationship between Turkic military elites and Persian administrators found its most perfect expression in the partnership between Sultan Malik Shah and his vizier Nizam al-Mulk. The latter, a Persian administrator of exceptional ability, effectively ran the empire while his Turkic master focused on military campaigns and hunting. Nizam al-Mulk's administrative genius helped transform the Seljuk realm from a conquest state into a functioning empire with sophisticated taxation systems and bureaucratic structures. Nizam al-Mulk also authored the Siyasatnama, Book of Government, a remarkably practical manual for rulers that drew on Persian traditions of kingship dating back to pre-Islamic times. This text advised rulers on everything from appointing officials to managing spies, and became a foundational text for Islamic governance for centuries. The Seljuk period saw important religious developments as well. As champions of Sunni orthodoxy, they worked to counter Shia influences that had grown under previous dynasties. Their most significant contribution came through establishing madrasas, formal educational institutions throughout their territories. The Nizamiya of Baghdad, named after Nizam al-Mulk, who founded it, became one of the most prestigious centers of learning in the Islamic world. This era of cultural flourishing produced exceptional intellectual figures. Omar Khayyam exemplified the breadth of scholarship possible in this environment. A mathematician who calculated the solar year with remarkable precision and reformed the calendar, he was also a philosopher and poet whose quatrains expressed a complex worldview mixing skepticism, mysticism, and hedonism. Ironically, his poetry remained relatively obscure in the Persian-speaking world until Edward Fitzgerald's liberal translation introduced the Rubaiyat to Victorian England in the 19th century, making Khayyam posthumously famous across the Western world. The Seljuk period demonstrates a remarkable historical paradox: conquerors who were themselves culturally conquered. Though they wielded military power, Turkic rulers recognized the superiority of Persian administrative techniques and cultural models. They not only preserved Persian traditions, but actively promoted them, creating a cultural continuity that transcended political disruption. This pattern of Turkic rulers advancing Persian culture would repeat throughout history, with the Ottomans, Timurids, and Mughals all following similar patterns of cultural adoption despite their non-Persian origins. The thundering hooves of Mongol cavalry brought Persia face to face with near extinction in the early 13th century. What followed was perhaps the most catastrophic invasion in Persian history. Under Genghis Khan and later his grandson Hulagu Khan, the Mongol armies swept across the Iranian plateau with unprecedented brutality, establishing what became known as the Ilkhanate, a kingdom within the larger Mongol Empire. The scale of destruction defies modern comprehension. The once flourishing city of Nishapur, a center of Persian culture and scholarship, was methodically demolished in 1221. Historical accounts claim the Mongols killed nearly everyone: men, women, and children, even slaughtering cats and dogs before razing buildings to the ground. Similarly, at Merv, contemporary chronicles report that Mongol soldiers were each assigned a quota of several hundred people to execute, resulting in hundreds of thousands of deaths in a single week. This wasn't simple conquest, it was systematic devastation. The Mongols destroyed the Qanat irrigation systems that had sustained Persian agriculture for millennia. Libraries containing irreplaceable manuscripts burned, government centers collapsed. Urban populations plummeted as survivors fled to mountains and deserts. Persian civilization, which had absorbed and transformed numerous invaders over the centuries, seemed finally broken under Mongol savagery. Yet, remarkably, within 2 generations, something unexpected happened. The conquerors themselves began to change. Hulagu Khan personally converted to Buddhism, but his successors, particularly Ghazan Khan, who ruled from 1295 to 1304, embraced Islam. With his religious conversion came a profound shift in governance priorities. Instead of extraction and punishment, the Ilkhans began focusing on reconstruction, revenue, and administration, drawing heavily on Persian expertise to do so. At the heart of this transformation stood Rashid al-Din, a Jewish physician who had converted to Islam and became Ghazan's vizier. This remarkable statesman helped implement agricultural reforms, rebuilt cities, and stabilized taxation. Equally significant, he authored the Jami al-Tawarikh, Compendium of Chronicles, an astonishing world history that synthesized Persian, Mongol, Chinese, and Islamic historical traditions. This work represented something revolutionary, historical writing that transcended cultural boundaries to create a genuinely global perspective. The relationship between conqueror and conquered evolved in surprising ways. The Mongol elite, originally steppe nomads with their own language and customs, gradually adopted Persian as their court language. Persian culture, rather than being extinguished, infiltrated and transformed Mongol identity. Artists, poets, and scholars found new patrons among the Mongol aristocracy. Astronomy, mathematics, and medicine flourished again in Persian centers of learning. The Mongol policy of religious tolerance, stemming from their shamanic traditions which accepted many paths to divine truth, allowed diverse religious communities to coexist across the empire. Sufism, in particular, thrived during this period, with mystical orders spreading throughout Persia and influencing art, poetry, and daily life. Perhaps most consequential for Persia's recovery was the Pax Mongolica, a relative peace established across the vast Mongol Empire that connected China to the Mediterranean. The Silk Road reached unprecedented levels of activity, with Persian merchants traveling safely to China and back. The Mongols brought Chinese paper-making technology westward, revolutionizing information sharing and record-keeping in Persia. The greatest irony of the Mongol period reveals itself when we consider the final outcome. These fierce nomads, who nearly destroyed Persian civilization, ultimately became its defenders and promoters. By connecting Persia to a vast intercontinental network, introducing new technologies, and eventually adopting Persian culture themselves, the Mongols inadvertently created conditions for a remarkable cultural renaissance. Within a century, the descendants of those who had ordered mass executions were commissioning exquisite Persian manuscripts, building observatories for Persian astronomers, and speaking Persian at court. Once again, Persian civilization had performed its most remarkable trick, absorbing and transforming its conquerors while preserving its essential character across the wreckage of political catastrophe. The Mongol invasion ended with surprising cultural revival, but it took another 2 centuries for Persia to regain true political independence. This came in 1501, when a remarkable young leader named Shah Ismail I seized power, founding the Safavid Empire that would transform Iran forever. Just 14 years old when he began his conquest, Ismail combined Persian and Turkic heritage with a charismatic religious authority that inspired fanatical loyalty. Ismail made a decision that permanently altered the course of Persian history. He declared Twelver Shia Islam as the official state religion. This was revolutionary. While Shia Muslims had existed in Persia for centuries, they had remained a minority. The Safavids actively converted the population through a mixture of persuasion, economic incentives, and sometimes force. The religious transformation created a sharp divide between Persia and its Sunni neighbors, particularly the powerful Ottoman Empire to the west. The ensuing Safavid-Ottoman rivalry sparked nearly 2 centuries of warfare, with bloody battles fought over territory, resources, and religious legitimacy. The religious boundary Ismail created still defines modern Iran's relationship with much of the Middle East. For the first time since the fall of the Sassanian Empire, Persia had a strong centralized state with a distinct religious identity that separated it from surrounding powers. While the early Safavid military relied on Turkic Kizilbash tribal warriors, the empire's administration and cultural expression remained decidedly Persian. Court documents, poetry, and historical chronicles were written in Persian, reinforcing the language as a pillar of national identity. The Safavids consciously connected themselves to ancient Persian kings through literature and art, weaving together Islamic and pre-Islamic traditions. The empire reached its zenith under Shah Abbas I, called the Great, who ruled from 1588 to 1629. Abbas modernized the military by creating a standing army with firearms, reducing dependence on tribal cavalry. He moved the capital to Isfahan and transformed it into one of the world's most beautiful cities. His urban planning centered around the magnificent Naqsh-e Jahan Square, a vast, open space surrounded by mosques, palaces, and bazaars that showcased Persian architectural genius. Under Abbas, the Safavid economy thrived. Persian carpets became luxury items sought throughout Europe and Asia. Silk production expanded massively, with Armenian merchants given special privileges to facilitate trade with European markets. The empire established diplomatic relations with European powers like England and the Netherlands, as well as Mughal India and Ming China. The Safavid Empire saw remarkable cultural flowering. Persian miniature painting evolved into a sophisticated art form, with royal workshops producing exquisitely detailed manuscripts. Master calligraphers developed new styles that merged artistic expression with religious devotion. Carpet weaving reached unprecedented levels of technical complexity and artistic refinement. Religious scholarship flourished as Shiite theologians debated doctrine and law, creating intellectual frameworks that continue to influence Iranian society today. European visitors to the Safavid court were often startled by its combination of opulence and religious humility. Shah Abbas would receive foreign ambassadors in halls gleaming with gold and jewels, yet he and his courtiers remained barefoot, a practice symbolizing humility before God that confused Europeans accustomed to elaborate footwear as a status symbol. Perhaps the most profound legacy of the Safavids was their creation of a distinctly Iranian national identity centered on Shia Islam. This religious cultural identity has proven remarkably durable, surviving in the fall of the Safavids themselves in the 18th century and persisting through subsequent dynasties, revolutions, and modern politics. By establishing Shia Islam as Iran's dominant faith, the Safavids permanently altered the religious map of the Middle East, creating a Shia-majority nation that stands distinct from its Sunni neighbors. This religious distinction continues to shape regional politics and conflicts to this day. The collapse of the Safavid Empire in 1722 threw Persia into a period of chaos and uncertainty. Afghan invaders occupied Isfahan, ending 2 centuries of relative stability. Persian society fragmented, with various fractions fighting for control of what remained of the empire. From this disarray, 2 remarkable but short-lived dynasties emerged that would shape the direction of Persian history: the Afsharids and the Zands. The first to restore Persian power was Nader Shah, a military commander of genius from the Afsharid tribe. Rising from humble origins as a shepherd boy, Nader assembled an army that drove out the Afghan occupiers in 1729. Initially, he placed a Safavid puppet on the throne, but in 1736, he seized power directly and established the Afsharid dynasty. Nader Shah proved to be an ambitious expansionist with remarkable military abilities. He recaptured territories lost to the Ottomans and Russians, then turned his attention eastward. His most spectacular campaign came in 1739, when he invaded India, defeated the Mughal Empire, and occupied Delhi. The spoils were unprecedented. He seized the magnificent Peacock Throne, the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond, and countless other treasures. So vast was his wealth that Nader canceled taxation in Persia for 3 years after his return. Despite these achievements, Nader's rule grew increasingly harsh. Constant warfare required heavy taxation, and his suspicion of potential rivals evolved into outright paranoia. He ordered mass blinding of subjects in certain regions and executed countless nobles he perceived as threats. By 1747, his tyranny became unbearable, and he was assassinated by his own officers during a military campaign. With Nader's death, the empire quickly disintegrated. His nephew briefly held power before being overthrown, and Persia again descended into factional conflict. From this second period of instability, a different kind of leader emerged. Karim Khan Zand, a military commander from the Lur tribe, gradually consolidated power by 1751. Unlike his predecessors, Karim Khan rejected imperial pretensions. He never adopted the title of Shah, instead calling himself Vakil al-Ra'aya, advocate of the people. This humble styling reflected his more practical approach to governance. Establishing his capital at Shiraz, Karim Khan focused on internal development rather than foreign conquest. He built bazaars, mosques, and bathhouses, improved irrigation systems, and strengthened trade routes. His rule provided a welcome respite from the military campaigns and heavy taxation of previous decades. Under Karim Khan's leadership, Shiraz flourished as a center of Persian culture. Poets and artists received patronage, gardens were planted, and the distinctive architecture of the Zand period emerged. The Vakil Bazaar and Vakil Mosque, still standing in Shiraz today, demonstrate the refined aesthetic of this period. Foreign observers noted the relative prosperity and justice under Karim Khan's rule. Unlike Nader Shah, who inspired fear throughout the region, Karim Khan maintained peaceful relations with neighbors when possible. He secured Persian control over the Gulf Coast and developed the port of Bushehr for trade. When Karim Khan died in 1779, after nearly 30 years of rule, he left no clear succession plan. His death triggered another round of power struggles among his relatives and military commanders. The Zand dynasty continued in increasingly weakened form until 1794, when it was finally overthrown by the Qajars. Both the Afsharid and Zand dynasties represent different models of leadership during turbulent times. Nader Shah briefly restored Persian military might through conquest and plunder, becoming so feared that both Ottoman and Mughal rulers paid him tribute. Karim Khan chose a different path, earning respect through moderation and domestic improvements. His unusual refusal to call himself Shah, unprecedented in Persian monarchy, reflected a pragmatic approach that prioritized stability over glory. This contrast explains why Persians today remember the humble Karim Khan far more fondly than the mighty conqueror Nader Shah. After the short-lived Zand dynasty, a new power emerged in Iran. The Qajar dynasty began in 1789 when Aga Muhammad Khan, a leader from the Turkic Qajar tribe, defeated his rivals and established control over most of the Iranian plateau. His reunification of Iran came at a terrible cost, most notoriously in Kerman, where he ordered thousands of eyes collected and brought to him after the city resisted his authority. This brutal beginning set the tone for what would become a 136-year dynasty marked by both cultural richness and political decline. The Qajars inherited a very different world than their Safavid predecessors. European powers, particularly Russia and Britain, had grown enormously in military and economic strength. The Industrial Revolution had transformed warfare and commerce. Iran, still largely agricultural and tribal, found itself increasingly vulnerable to outside pressures. This vulnerability became painfully clear during the Russo-Persian Wars of the early 19th century. In 1813, the Treaty of Gulistan forced Iran to surrender its territories in the Caucasus, including modern-day Georgia and parts of Azerbaijan. The 1828 Treaty of Turkmenchay delivered an even harsher blow, ceding Armenia and more Caucasian territories while granting Russians special economic privileges within Iran. These humiliating losses of ancestral Iranian lands demonstrated the growing gap between European and Persian military capabilities. Recognizing their technological disadvantage, Qajar rulers like Abbas Mizra and Nasser al-Din Shah attempted modernization efforts. They sent students to Europe, established Western-style military academies, built telegraph lines, and created Iran's first modern newspaper. A significant development was the founding of Dar al-Funan in 1851, Iran's first modern higher education institution, which taught medicine, engineering, and military sciences. These reforms, however, remained superficial and inconsistent. The Qajar court maintained lavish spending, while most infrastructure improvements benefited only elite circles. The government's chronic financial problems led rulers to sell economic concessions to European powers, eroding Iran's sovereignty. Most notorious was the 1872 Reuter Concession, which granted a British baron control over Iranian railways, mines, forests, and industrial development for 70 years, a deal so one-sided that even the Russian government protested it. As European influence grew, so did resistance among merchants, religious scholars, and intellectuals. In 1891, when Nasser al-Din Shah granted a tobacco monopoly to a British company, a nationwide boycott erupted. Led by religious leaders who declared tobacco use forbidden until the concession was canceled, this successful protest demonstrated the power of popular resistance and religious authority against royal decisions. This spirit of resistance culminated in the Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911. After years of economic hardship and foreign interference, merchants, clergy, intellectuals, and urban workers demanded limitations on royal power and the establishment of rule of law. Following strikes and massive protests, Mozaffar al-Din Shah agreed to establish a constitution and parliament, or majlis, in 1906. The first constitution created a bicameral legislature and recognized certain citizen rights, a revolutionary development in Iranian political history. The constitutional experiment faced immediate challenges. The next Shah, Muhammad Ali, bombarded the parliament building in 1908 with Russian support. Though constitutionalists eventually regained control, the revolution was undermined by foreign intervention. By 1907, Britain and Russia had formally divided Iran into spheres of influence without Iranian consent. Northern provinces under Russian control, southeastern regions under British influence, with only a small neutral zone in between. In the late Qajar period, Persian intellectuals responded to these humiliations by reviving national pride through literature and history. Writers glorified pre-Islamic Persian heroes and ancient achievements, laying groundwork for the nationalist movements that would eventually overthrow the dynasty. This cultural nationalism represented a powerful response to the reality that, while never formally colonized, Iran had effectively lost its independence through a form of soft imperialism that left it politically divided, economically exploited, and increasingly demoralized. The year 1925 marked a pivotal turning point in Persian history as Reza Khan, a former officer in the Persian Cossack Brigade, overthrew the last Qajar ruler and established the Pahlavi dynasty. Crowning himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, he set out to transform Iran from a fractured, semi-colonial state into a modern, centralized nation. Reza Shah drew inspiration from Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's modernization of Turkey. Like his Turkish counterpart, he believed that only radical westernization could save Iran from foreign domination and internal weakness. His reforms touched nearly every aspect of Iranian society. He built Iran's first national railway system, connecting the Caspian Sea to the Persian Gulf. He established modern schools and Tehran University to produce a new generation of educated Iranians. He created a modern army and bureaucracy loyal to the central government rather than tribal or religious leaders. Most controversially, Reza Shah attacked traditional dress codes. He banned the veil for women and required men to wear European-style clothing and Western hats. Civil servants who refused could lose their jobs or face arrest. These cultural changes, imposed from above, generated significant resistance, especially among religious communities. In 1935, Reza Shah officially changed the country's name from Persia to Iran, a term derived from Aryan that emphasized the nation's pre-Islamic identity and historical roots. This change reflected his nationalist vision of a strong, independent state connected to its ancient past. Despite his modernizing agenda, Reza Shah ruled with an iron fist. He crushed tribal autonomy, censored the press, imprisoned political opponents, and severely restricted religious institutions. His land registration programs, while modernizing property relations, often transferred wealth to his supporters and the new urban elite. In 1941, British and Soviet forces occupied Iran due to its strategic importance during World War II and Reza Shah's perceived German sympathies. The occupation forces compelled him to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who would rule until 1979. The young Mohammad Reza Shah initially had limited power, governing under constitutional constraints while political parties flourished. However, in 1953, when Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the British-controlled oil industry, the CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup that removed him. This intervention strengthened the Shah's position while creating lasting anti-Western sentiment among many Iranians. By the 1960s, Mohammad Reza Shah had consolidated his authority and launched the White Revolution, a series of reforms including land distribution, voting rights for women, literacy programs, and industrial development. While these changes modernized Iran's economy and society, they also disrupted traditional power structures and rural life. Iran's oil wealth fueled rapid economic growth during the 1960s and 1970s. Tehran transformed with modern buildings, highways, and Western consumer goods. But this prosperity was unevenly distributed. The gap between rich and poor widened, while corruption spread throughout the system. The Shah's modernization came with increasing political repression. His secret police, Savak, became notorious for surveillance, torture, and crushing dissent. Opposition figures faced imprisonment, exile, or worse. While presenting himself as progressive to Western allies, the Shah tolerated no meaningful political participation at home. In 1971, the Shah staged an extravagant celebration of the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire at Persepolis. The event cost millions and featured elaborate ceremonies, imported food, and international celebrities. While intended to showcase Iran's ancient glory and modern progress, it instead highlighted the disconnect between the monarchy's lavish lifestyle and the struggles of ordinary Iranians. As the 1970s progressed, an unlikely coalition formed against the Shah: religious conservatives opposed to westernization, intellectuals demanding democracy, and leftists fighting inequality. Despite having one of the world's largest militaries and America's full support, the Shah's regime would prove surprisingly vulnerable when these forces united against him. The events of 1979 in Iran represent one of history's most significant political transformations, a revolution that ended not just a dynasty, but 2,500 years of continuous monarchical rule. What makes this revolution remarkable was its broad popular support and its unexpected outcome: the world's first modern theocratic state. By the late 1970s, the Shah's regime faced opposition from nearly every segment of Iranian society. Religious conservatives resented Western cultural influence and secularization policies. The educated middle class demanded political freedoms. Workers struggled with inflation despite the country's oil wealth. Bazaar merchants chafed under economic controls. These diverse grievances converged into a unified movement against the monarchy. The Shah's close relationship with the United States further undermined his legitimacy. Many Iranians saw him as an American puppet after the 1953 coup that restored him to power. His lavish lifestyle, exemplified by the extravagant Persepolis celebrations, contrasted sharply with the economic hardships faced by ordinary citizens. Resentment towards Savak, the Shah's brutal secret police, ran deep, fueling the urgency of revolution. From his exile in Iraq and later France, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini emerged as the revolution's spiritual leader. A senior Shia cleric who had opposed the Shah since the 1960s, Khomeini developed a theory of Islamic government that rejected monarchy as un-Islamic. His sermons, recorded on cassette tapes and smuggled into Iran, provided both religious justification for revolution and practical guidance for resistance. The revolutionary momentum accelerated throughout 1978. In January, a government-planted newspaper article insulting Khomeini triggered protests in the religious city of Qom. When security forces killed demonstrators, traditional 40-day mourning cycles created a rhythm of recurring protests across the country. In September, a demonstration in Tehran's Jaleh Square ended with government forces firing on crowds, killing hundreds in what became known as Black Friday. By late 1978, the revolution had become unstoppable. Oil workers went on strike, crippling the economy. Government employees refused to work. Millions participated in coordinated protests, many carrying photos of Khomeini. The military began to disintegrate as conscripts deserted rather than fire on fellow citizens. On January 16, 1979, the Shah left Iran, ostensibly for medical treatment, but never to return. 2 weeks later, on February 1st, Khomeini arrived in Tehran to a hero's welcome. Millions lined the streets as he made his way from the airport to the city's main cemetery, where he paid respects to those killed during the revolution. The Shah's departure was so hasty that personal belongings remained in the palace, including half-packed suitcases and even his dog. The symbols of monarchy were quickly dismantled as revolutionary committees took control of government buildings, television stations, and police headquarters. Though the revolution united diverse factions, Islamic conservatives, liberal nationalists, and leftist groups, this coalition quickly fractured after victory. Khomeini and his clerical allies outmaneuvered secular and leftist revolutionaries through superior organization, religious authority, and popular support. The interim government, established by moderate revolutionary Mehdi Barzargan, found itself increasingly sidelined by parallel Islamic revolutionary committees. In April 1979, a national referendum offered a simple choice: Islamic Republic, yes or no. With over 98% voting yes, Iran formally abandoned monarchy and established a system based on Khomeini's concept of velayat-e-faqih, guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which placed ultimate authority in the hands of religious scholars, particularly the supreme leader. What makes the Iranian Revolution unique in modern history is that it resulted in a theocracy rather than a democracy or socialist state. Unlike other 20th century revolutions led by Marxists or nationalists, Iran's revolution installed religious leaders as the ultimate political authority. This new model of governance would influence Islamic movements worldwide, presenting an alternative to both Western liberal democracy and Soviet communism. The revolution permanently altered the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and established a system of government that continues to shape Iran's destiny more than 4 decades later. The 1979 revolution transformed Iran into a system unlike any other in the modern world. The Islamic Republic combined elements of democracy with theocratic oversight, creating a dual structure where elected officials shared power with religious authorities. At the top sat Ayatollah Khomeini as supreme leader, exercising control based on the doctrine of velayat-e-faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This system established religious scholars as the ultimate interpreters and enforcers of the law, placing them above elected officials. The new government moved quickly to consolidate power. Former allies who had helped overthrow the Shah but held secular or moderate religious views found themselves marginalized. Revolutionary courts tried thousands of officials from the previous regime. Many faced execution, particularly those associated with Savak, the Shah's intelligence service. Left-wing groups that had initially supported the revolution became targets of persecution when they challenged clerical authority. Within months, what had begun as a broad revolutionary coalition narrowed into a government dominated by conservative Islamic clerics. The defining moment in the Islamic Republic's foreign relations came in November 1979, when a group of students calling themselves followers of the Imam's line seized the American embassy in Tehran. What began as a planned short protest evolved into a 444-day hostage crisis involving 52 American diplomats and citizens. Though Khomeini did not order the embassy takeover, he quickly supported it, understanding its value in consolidating revolutionary fervor and eliminating moderate voices who favored normalized relations with the West. The crisis destroyed U.S.-Iranian relations and began decades of mutual hostility. Inside Iran, the revolution touched every aspect of daily life. Women faced mandatory hijab requirements, with morality police enforcing dress codes in public spaces. Gender segregation became common in schools, beaches, and public transportation. The education system underwent complete revision to emphasize Islamic principles. The arts faced strict censorship, with Western music and films often banned. Religious courts expanded their jurisdiction, applying interpretations of Sharia law to criminal and civil cases. This transformation had barely begun when Iraq's Saddam Hussein launched an invasion in September 1980, hoping to capitalize on Iran's revolutionary disarray. The resulting Iran-Iraq War lasted 8 years and cost over 1 million lives. Iranian forces, including teenage volunteers, conducted human wave attacks against Iraqi positions. Some young soldiers reportedly received plastic keys to wear around their necks, symbolizing guaranteed entry to paradise if they died in battle. The war, though devastating, helped the Islamic Republic solidify its authority. The external threat united Iranians behind the government and justified crackdowns on internal opposition. Revolutionary Guards, initially created to protect the revolution, expanded into a powerful military, political, and economic force. Iran portrayed the conflict as not merely a war with Iraq, but a struggle against global powers that supported Saddam with weapons and intelligence. When Ayatollah Khomeini died in 1989, millions attended his funeral in a massive display of public mourning. His successor, Ali Khamenei, lacked Khomeini's religious credentials. He was elevated from mid-ranking cleric to Ayatollah to qualify for the position. This tension between religious authority and political power continued to shape the Islamic Republic's development. Post-war Iran focused on reconstruction while maintaining its revolutionary ideals in foreign policy. The country supported Hezbollah in Lebanon and opposed the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Relations with Saudi Arabia deteriorated as both nations competed for regional influence. Suspicions about Iran's nuclear program led to international sanctions that isolated the country economically. The Islamic Republic's constitution remains unique in the modern world. While it includes elected institutions like the presidency and parliament, these operate under supervision of unelected religious bodies. The Guardian Council vets candidates and legislation, while the Supreme Leader controls the military, judiciary, and state media. This system ensured that despite internal political competition between conservatives and reformists, the fundamental theocratic nature of the state remained unchanged, a revolutionary model that continues to define Iran 4 decades after its creation. Today's Iran presents a study in sharp contrasts. The Islamic Republic that emerged from the 1979 revolution remains politically resilient yet internally divided. Modern Iranian society exists in a state of tension between religious governance and secular aspirations, between isolation and global engagement, between tradition and modernity. Iran's nuclear program stands at the center of its international relations. Beginning in the early 2000s, Iran's uranium enrichment activities triggered global concern. While Iranian officials insist the program serves only peaceful energy purposes, Western nations fear potential weapons development. This standoff led to increasingly harsh sanctions that devastated Iran's economy. Oil exports, which once fueled national prosperity, plummeted. The banking system faced exclusion from global networks. Ordinary Iranians struggled with inflation, unemployment, and shortages of essential goods. Internal political tensions reached a boiling point in 2009. After President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad claimed victory in an election widely viewed as fraudulent, millions of Iranians took to the streets in what became known as the Green Movement. Security forces responded with arrests, beatings, and killings. The government shut down communications networks and imprisoned opposition leaders. This brutal suppression temporarily quelled public protests, but deepened the divide between the state and many citizens. Despite international pressure, Iran expanded its regional influence through a network of proxy forces. In Lebanon, Hezbollah serves as a powerful ally. In Iraq, Iran-backed militias gained strength after the fall of Saddam Hussein. As the Syrian civil war erupted, Iranian forces helped keep Bashar al-Assad in power. In Yemen, Iran supported Houthi rebels against Saudi-backed government forces. This strategy gave Iran significant leverage across the Middle East, but heightened tensions with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. A potential breakthrough came in 2015 with the signing of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. Under this agreement, Iran accepted limits on its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. For a brief period, economic conditions improved and diplomatic channels reopened. However, in 2018, President Trump withdrew the United States from the deal and reimposed sanctions under a maximum pressure policy. The Iranian economy contracted sharply, with the currency losing much of its value and inflation soaring above 40%. The most striking aspect of contemporary Iran is the demographic and cultural divide. Over 70% of Iran's population is under 40, meaning most Iranians were born after the 1979 revolution. This younger generation, highly educated and connected to global culture through VPNs and social media, often holds values dramatically different from the aging clerical establishment. Iran, paradoxically, has one of the world's highest rate of cosmetic surgery, underground music production, and virtual private network usage, all existing beneath the surface of religious governance. Women's rights remain a particularly sensitive flashpoint. In September 2022, the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini while in custody of the morality police for improper hijab sparked nationwide protests. The Woman, Life, Freedom movement that followed represented the most significant challenge to the Islamic Republic in years. Despite violent crackdowns that killed hundreds and imprisoned thousands, many women continued to defy hijab requirements in daily acts of civil disobedience. Throughout Iran, resistance takes many forms. Underground art exhibitions showcase work that couldn't pass official censors. Musicians create and distribute music despite restrictions. Filmmakers use metaphor and symbolism to comment on social issues while evading direct censorship. On social media platforms, despite government filtering, Iranians maintain contact with the outside world. The story of modern Iran is not simply one of repression. It is a complex interplay between a rigid ideological system and a dynamic society pushing against its constraints. As economic pressures mount and generational change continues, the fundamental question remains: can the Islamic Republic adapt to the aspirations of its population, or will the growing disconnect between state and society eventually force more dramatic change? Persia's story is one of resilience. Empires rose and fell, but Persian identity endured, absorbing and transforming every conqueror. It's a legacy of adaptation, not isolation. If you enjoyed this journey through 2,500 years of history, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic stories from the past.